So it's three quite famous people in one poster. Anyway, there was a filler. We good to go? Paloma, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Rand Club. Today we're at the book launch of Angus Douglas's new book, In the Name of the Father. Now, this book that you've done is very much a journey, Angus. And could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. So, James, as I was saying to you earlier, I was at university from 86, from 87 to 1990. You mentioned the End Conscription Campaign. I was a member of the End Conscription Campaign and of NUSAS. I suppose I was a liberal white student who, like the rest of the world, could clearly see that apartheid surely could not last. White supremacy had to go, and so I was active in that. And I suppose, given the times of the day, I suppose I was relatively diverse and open to what a new South Africa that would be multiracial or non-racial and black friends, etc. And welcomed the dawn of the Rainbow Nation of the Mandela era. I think over the past, maybe you perhaps have to say, more or less sort of starting with Thabo Mbeki, who in some ways maybe he's been our best president in the sense that he had a vision for a pan-African country, a rising African nation, which I think most people could agree there was something positive in that. But he very quickly started to, in some ways, racialize our situation. He didn't divide the country up. It wasn't about poor and rich. It was about white, rich, and black, poor. That was the type of language he used. It was language redolent of the struggle era when white supremacy needed to be brought down, and it felt like this was more about nostalgia than reality. Anyway, Thabo Mbeki wasn't too bad. Then we got Jacob Zuma, and things became, let's say, went from worrying to disturbing. Now we had someone who was clearly stealing the country, sending bits of the state off to the Guptas for sake of patronage. And then I was one of many South Africans going, this is really terrible. How can it get worse? So then we had Ramaphosa, Ramaphosa came in. I was very relieved, actually. I was very happy. I thought Ramaphosa was a genuinely decent enough person. He seemed to be pro-business. He didn't have a lot of race baggage. He wasn't seemingly not against the minorities or anything like that, which I felt Mbeki was a bit. And I thought there would be hope. But hope dies last, and I think we've now reached a point where we're going, okay, we need to look beyond hope. And that's why I wrote this book, to give us something to think about that goes beyond the hope that this rainbow dream will come true. I think it's fair to say it hasn't, it won't, it never will. And as a minority, we need to rather deal with reality, not to say we can't live fruitful, good, positive, meaningful lives. I think we must live good, positive lives if we're going to be in this country. As South Africans, we need to get involved, we need to have our voice, we need to have our say, but we need to base that on reality, not on hope.
And how do we achieve that?
Well, you buy this book. It's got all the answers, and I think, I just want to say my personal journey, was that it was interesting for me, actually. I mean, I'm interested in philosophy, I'm interested in truth seeking, and so I found it to be an interesting philosophical journey, because we all know what we wanted to happen. We wanted the non-racial dream to come true, whatever you want to call it, the Mandela vision, the Rainbow Nation. I think most of us, it was all of our interests. Even if you were, let's say, a conservative white person stuck in the past, it's not in your interest to live in a country that's falling apart. You want to live in a country that's thriving. You want to live in a country that's safe and secure. So I think, for me, the most important thing is that you're never going to get to the solution unless you deal with the truth, unless you put the rotting, stinky fish on the table and talk about it, as opposed to wondering what the smell is and pretending it's not there. Rather, let's look at it, let's deal with the truth, and then we might have some hope. We might have a chance, we may not, might be too far gone, but we give ourselves a chance. That's not a comfortable thing, I can assure you. Writing this book was, in many regards, heartbreaking to come to some worrying conclusions about. I'll just give you an example. I mean, if you were liberal in the 80s or even in the 70s, and you said, well, everyone should have equal political rights, I mean, I still believe that, people would say, oh, well, if that's the case, we're living in South Africa, then you're going to have black majority rule, and look at the rest of Africa, we're going to land up a basket case like the rest of Africa. That was an uncomfortable argument to deal with.
Yes.
But we have to deal with it. I mean, I don't think there's a way. We can't pretend that's not a reality. We can't pretend that we don't have to engage difficult questions like that. And I tried to do that fairly. I didn't want to, clearly white supremacy is off the table. That's never going to happen again. Thankfully, we never want to go back to that, and we never can, and we never will.
Yes.
But in Mandela's words, I fought against white domination and I fought against black domination. I think we need to bring back that second part and say, we also can't have black supremacy either. We need something in between.
Angus, why can't we have a success like Namibia?
I think the comparison is a poor one. I think Namibia is a tiny country which it shares a border with us, but in many respects it's a totally different scenario to South Africa. I mean, I think if you were to compare us to another country, I would rather compare us to Venezuela. And there's many reasons why you would. Now, Venezuela is right now a basket case. I mean, teachers are earning starving basically because they're not getting paid. There's every reason to believe that South Africa could become Venezuela. I think much more than could become Namibia. And so I think when you've got a country of 1.5 million people, or Botswana, you've got enough resources to keep going. You don't have 30 million people who live below the poverty line as they do in South Africa. You don't have millions who are trying to get into the country to look for work, etc. You don't have a very advanced industrialized economy. Well, it used to be, it's becoming less so. I think we need to compare apples with apples. I think South Africa is an important country. As I said, it's the continent's most sort of sophisticated, industrialized nation. It deserves to be saved. There are a lot of people here. There's a lot of future generations to come. It's got the bottom end of the African coastline, massive long coastline, big, beautiful, one of the most diverse countries in the world in terms of nature, in terms of populations as well. Surely this is a country worth saving, you would argue. I mean, it's not worth letting it collapse.
And we are, after all, an extremely rich country in terms of resources, skill, and even unemployed labour, for that matter, could be termed as a benefit.
Yeah, so, so I think if you looked at countries that have lots of resources versus Singapore doesn't have any resources whatsoever. It's a very rich country. There's Democratic Republic of Congo has a lot of resources, and it's a very poor country. I mean, what you have underneath the ground is of not too much significance in terms of generating wealth. Any economist will tell you that. What we have lost, and I'll cut to the chase. So this book, covers quite a few areas, but I did go into a bit of Francis Fukuyama, who talks about political order. If you had to boil down and say, okay, so what is South Africa's problem and why aren't we this rich country? It's because of our institutions. Our institutions have become degraded. Obvious example is Eskom. Eskom used to be a far more coherent, efficient institution than it is today. Now that's a huge So institutional knowledge or institutional coherence is key to nation building. We all know that. Any Francis Fukuyama says, well, political order consists of three things. It consists of state building, it consists of accountable government, and it consists of rule of law. Now, until we have, okay, in some respects you could argue we have accountable government, fair enough, but until we have something like the rule of law, not a rule of law, and state building, we're finished. And at the moment we have state breaking, and the rule of law that we do have is often performed by communities themselves, and we have to go out and police their own streets or pay private people to do it. So, to me, it's where we stand. We have a cabinet minister who is probably the deputy president, or the outgoing one, David Mabuza, who's getting guys to throw spanners into boilers or whatever to break them. If you have high-level politicians trying to break infrastructure for sake of procurement deals, you don't have state building, you have state breaking and state deterioration, and ultimately you don't have a country. You have, I don't know, something like Somalia, a bunch of tribes and interest groups doing what they can.
So surely, Angus, getting back to hope, we're a democracy, and in May next year, this could all change and suddenly we could boom. Surely we on the edge of an absolute boom in all senses of the word.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, James. I mean, France Cremier used to be of the Institute of Race Relations. I think it's France Cremier. He's now got his own group that does scenario planning, and he's incredibly well researched and accurate or very good commentator. And he says that hope is coming, or South Africa will take off. I think he said 2030. I can't remember. He said, look, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we are going to lift off, and maybe that's true. I would love that to be true, and it could well be. I do hope. In terms of next year, 2024, and again I mentioned this in the book here, is that, I mean, in some ways we all wish that countries weren't oriented, or politics wasn't oriented around a kind of Marxist vision of one class in eternal battle against another class, and the proletarian against the bourgeoisie, which comes from a German philosopher, Hegel, who has this kind of grand narrative of history of classes opposing each other. We all wish that we were, in fact, what 1994 promised, that we were non-racial individuals. We weren't defined by race, we were just defined as people, as characters, free to grow in our own personality. Race was going to be, if not a non-issue, it was going to be much less of an issue. We find that we got halfway there. We find that apartheid was an absolutely despicable system for many reasons, not even worth going into here. And ultimately, it was wrong in the sense that it's true that people can get on. We don't all have to be the same race to work together, to live together, who knows, to marry each other or whatever. We can have that sort of diversity on a social level, or on a romantic level, or on a work level. But when it comes to politics, we're still stuck. Quite honestly, we might as well be stuck in 1820 or 1920. We are as racialized as we've ever been. The minorities vote almost to a person, either for the DA or perhaps to parties to the centre-right of the ANC, but they're very much against the ANC. Even colours are largely very, very much against the ANC, even though the ANC has given favourable, included colours and Indians in their black empowerment type legislation up till now, which was a fair call for them. They are still against the ANC. The ANC has become very much a black African party, so at the elective conference, the top 100 people voted in, all but one was black Africans. One white person, no coloured, no Indian in the top 100. That's how racial the ANC has become. We are not in a non-racial country at all when it comes to politics. Let me be clear here. In some ways, we're in a non-racial country socially, and this is a great triumph. When it comes to politics, unfortunately, the fact is we're in a straight majoritarian situation, straight proportional representation. 85% of the country is Black African, as I say. They were, now, population groups are difficult, but the fact is that they were oppressed as that group. If they didn't have an identity as Black African, they were certainly given one by white colonists and by apartheid policymakers. They called them that, they formed that group, they separated them out as that. It's not surprising that they would have a political consciousness around that. You can't blame them for that, okay, come 1994. Now you're in a majoritarian system. Why wouldn't you, as a politician, play to that group? Trump played, in some respects, to kind of white nationalism, a bit of dog whistling, not blatantly, and it worked for him. You know, he got a lot of votes like that. He didn't get many minority votes, but he didn't need them. Now, our demographics are even more predominantly Black African than America's are white American. Why wouldn't politicians? Now, the EFF comes from nowhere, and it's suddenly the third biggest party, it's making the most noise, etc. And it simply plays that same narrative. So, come 2024, it's unlikely that the minorities in 2024 or ever will have true, proper representation at the top table of national government. They can have it in the Cape because the demographics are different. That's just a fact. We can't do anything about that. Now, the problem with that, that's, you could say that's bad enough. Most countries in the world, minorities are minoritized politically. This happens. Nothing new there. We've got a problem though. We're not talking about any old minority, we're talking about a minority that's still privileged, whites and Indians to a great extent as well. In the case of whites, not only are they privileged, they are the previous oppressors. Again, that's a great narrative for the people playing to the majority. Okay. Thirdly, and most worryingly, whites and Indians predominantly make up the professional managerial class in this country. Okay, those are the people technocratically in private business who gets to run Eskom, Andre de Ruyter, who's the next person running it, I forget his name, he's an Indian person, okay? These are the people we rely on to run this technocratic state. Now, everyone would hope it wouldn't be that, and that obviously Africans would come through and take over the professional managerial class. Of course that was the vision for the likes of Mbeki. It hasn't quite happened enough for us to be off the hook. So, we're in a bit of a codependent problem. Black African government relies on the professional managerial class. The professional needs them for taxes and private business and to help run what's still left running in the state-owned enterprises. Yet, those are the people most at odds with its vision, if it has one, of a sort of pan-African or Africanist idea, African-run country coming forward. We've got a real problem there.
So, are we on an inevitable trajectory then? Is hope dead?
So, you know, who knows what the future holds. I just know that, I just want to say one thing, and I mentioned in the book here, if you read it, you'll see. But I think what is a bad move for the minorities, and Helen Zille talks about it. You must remember, Helen Zille, people say, okay, well, what's the problem, guys? The DA needs to get a black leader. Come on. We're not racist, we've got a black leader, we can get black votes in, and it's all fine. Helen Zille tried to boost Rampele, if I'm getting the name right, Mmusi Maimane, Lindiwe Mazibuko, and to a certain extent Herman Mashaba. We've got a black leader, we're pushing a black leader forward, and this will mean that we're non-racist. Ultimately that backfires, it's dishonest. You're playing the same game, you're accusing the ANC, you're playing the race politics that you're accusing other people of doing. Okay, Helen Zille and the DA have more or less given up on that. And I think it's right that they give up on that. I think that's dishonest. And she said, someone wrote a post, I put in the book, someone wrote a post and said, you know, when you're trying to be woke and it's not enough. And she said, it'll never be enough. It's like feeding steaks to crocodiles in the hope it becomes a vegetarian. So we can't, you know, you are who you are, and we can't play the game of trying to pretend to belong to another group, or trying to pretend that this is a non-racial world or something like that. I mean, the fact is we are a minority here. It just is a fact. Anyone can look at you and see that you, like a wattle, didn't come from here. You know what I mean?
Accusing me of my height.
So, you know, the book ends with me joining AfriForum, actually. I mean, I'm an English-speaking liberal. I'm the last person who should be joining AfriForum. But the reason I joined AfriForum is I realized that, you know what, we are a minority. We are always going to be a target here. Okay, privileged minorities get picked on all over the world, not just South Africa. It's a normal story. No, it's not a big deal. We're always going to be on the back foot. Politically, particularly, we will definitely be. If a minority is still here, he's the previous oppressor, and he's privileged, you're going to be fighting a rearguard action. It's just the nature. So, I read the AfriForum manifesto and I thought, well, at last, someone's kind of calling the situation like it just is. It just is like this. And we need to, you know, with all decency and, you know, whatever non-racial spirit and open, inclusive spirit, do what we can to protect what is right, to protect the Constitution, to protect, and I'm going to use the word, civilization. It is such a thing as civilization. It's not just good for one race group, it's good for everyone. That's the point of civilization, that it's not sectarian, it's not tribal, it's universal. Okay? We should get rid of the woke thinking. I think it's been the most disastrous turn for the Western world. It doesn't help anyone. You cannot reverse, you know, you can't fight, I'll put it simply, you can't fight hate with hate. All right? You fight hate with love and inclusion and universal values.
That makes lots of sense. You know, my own reflections are that I live in the inner city and have done for a couple of years, and walk to the very markets within blocks of here, and I have never, the only white person on the streets at that time of walking, I've never experienced one bit of racist comments or anything like that. So this is a bit of an anomaly. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, thank you. I mean, that's brilliant. I think it just proves what I say. So socially, on the ground,
Socially, I don't see any
there
example of racism.
isn't an issue.
Here in Rand Club, it doesn't exist, you know. So.
Absolutely, and I think that's a triumph. I mean, when you say, I agree with you. I mean, someone pointed out to me, you know, even at the height of Mugabe's kind of racist rants against whites and all that, he said, the average Zimbabwean wasn't running out trying to attack a white person. They weren't responding to it at all. Yes, they were taking farms because there was money to be made for some ZANU bigwig. But on the ground, people didn't listen to that and go, oh, you know, I'm going to hate you.
Yes.
So it's a political expedient race, isn't it?
Yes.
Right now for people, and I understand. You know, if you're in the majority, of course you're going to play that game. If you're a black politician, of course you are. If Trump's going to do it in America, for example, why wouldn't you do it here?
Yeah.
So no, thank you. Yeah.
So that we've just done about 20 minutes there, and the part of the object of today is to open it up to the floor, and you guys are welcome to give Angus some challenging questions. Do we have a start? Yes, please.
Hi, Angus.
Great.
Good. Cape Exit. Comments on that? And
Sorry, on
Cape Exit. And the reality of
so
Cape
yeah, Greg. I mean, yeah. So Greg's asking, you know, Cape wants to break away. Like your demographics. I mean, firstly, I would say that it's a tragedy and a failure that our politics is still driven by demographics. That's not something to be happy about. It's heartbreaking. No one wanted that to happen. That wasn't meant to happen. It wasn't envisaged in our constitution. The fact is it has happened. So the DA rules in the Cape, predominantly, basically for one reason and one reason alone, is that the Cape was 40% mixed race, coloured, so-called coloured, 15% white, I think, and you know, something like that, 40% African. Therefore, the non-African, non-black African voters can outvote, and they can predominate, and they can vote the DA, and that's what they do. We wish it wasn't like that. We wish politics wasn't demographic, but it is. People vote, according to Jonathan Haidt, I put it in the book, people vote by group, not by conviction. They vote for their dreams, They don't vote for the reality. Okay, they vote for a vision. This vision. So I don't know how the Cape. Okay, another frightening example. 170,000 jobs were created in the fourth quarter of last year. 168,000 of those were in the Western Cape. Now, there's been virtually no comment on that. I mean, that's like the whole country should stop and say, well, what are we going to do about that? That's a serious problem. Now, if you're a business and you're in business of creating jobs, you probably are right now rather thinking, I just feel more stable in the Cape. I feel the government is more pro-business. It wants business. It cares about business. It doesn't matter too much if the business is white or Indian. It just wants business. Because the rest of the country, well, we don't know. We don't know if there's going to be looting. We don't know if a state official is going to come bribe me. We don't know if I'm going to get hammered by BEE, by transformation. I call it the 4 horsemen of the ANC apocalypse. BEE, transformation, cadre deployment, and protected civil service jobs. Okay, that's what's ruining the economy. Okay, 4 horsemen of the ANC economic apocalypse. Okay, Cape doesn't have those, or has them to a lesser extent. Okay, I drive there recently, go potholes, and suddenly the potholes stop. I feel safer. Okay, I feel like there's a policeman there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like he's not going to just be getting a bribe out of me. I feel that the state is working here. Okay, and it's true. Anyone goes there, they will tell you that, like whatever race they are. It's like, oh yeah, the Cape's different. It's like a bit like being overseas. The state actually exists. It's not like someone's just trying to get a bribe out of you. You see, here's the thing. What are you saying if you separate the Cape out? Are you saying that basically, and this is a terrible thing to say, I'm sorry I'm going to say it, I put it on LinkedIn, and I don't like saying this. African majority rule has failed this country. There's no way to put it. Okay? Now, it wasn't meant to be that, it was meant to be non-racial majority rule. But as I've just pointed out, the ANC is by its own projection a black government. It itself is a black government. Okay? It sees itself as such. It behaves as it picks itself as such. It elects its members as such. Its vision is such. Its policies are such. And not even black in the sort of broader term, very much black African. Okay? Started off, it wasn't like that with Mandela. It was multiracial. He really did bring in people from the minorities who could help the cause of South Africa. He really did do that. Whether you like Mandela or not, he was multiracial. He brought in other race groups. And it worked. Okay, this was positive. This was a kind of nice in-between, between white supremacy and black supremacy. We had something in between, and it was workable. What happens, 168,000 jobs, so the Cape exit, we're out of here. Rest, a lot of people who've got those skills and create those jobs, then move there. Okay, guess what? No jobs here. What are those people going to do? They're going to say, well, we still belong to South Africa. You might say you're exiting. I'm still South Africa. That's part of South Africa. I need to go there and get a job. Okay. So, wherever there's a pocket of something working, whether it's in the Cape or whether it's South Africa, we get lots of people coming from all over the continent saying, I need a job. They don't really come here, they go overseas. If you've got a pocket of something working, surrounded by a whole bunch of stuff that's not working, you've got a whole lot of people who are aspirant, they want a better life for themselves, they want to improve their kids, they're going to go there, they're going to find a way. And here they have every right to go there. In 1910, whites drew a circle around and said, this is a country that's called South Africa. Okay, it's a bit of a tough one to say, oh, sorry, we got that wrong, this one's no longer South Africa. A, the demographic, B, the demographic is also changing. So what happens, Cape Exit happens, 10 years down the line, now you've got 55%, let's say, black African, they start to become nationalistic. They're saying, hey, hang on a second, this is also our place, we're going to vote. Are you going to say we're going to create a different system which says, listen here, and maybe this is what should have happened. It's not one person, one vote as such, it's not a non-racial vote, we're going to have power groups, you're going to have 30% reserved for a white type vote, 30% for a coloured type vote, 30% for an African type vote. Is that the way to do it? I don't know. So it's complicated. I just can't see and I speak to a lot of people about this, I just can't see a Cape secession happening. If you know the answer, I would say communities have to try and build resilience. They have to work together, even if it's at suburb level. Fix the electricity, fix the security, get the drug dealers off the street. If our children can't walk on the street, and they can't, but I live in Melbourne, without being propositioned, and their children, they're like 13 or 14, without being propositioned by someone selling hard drugs. If a woman can't walk that street, you don't have security. If you don't have that security, you don't have a country. Okay. So I think, I don't know, I mean, I am, as you can tell, I'm confused myself, but I think we just have to, it is a bit of enclave living, and we have to protect what we can and work where we can. OUTA is interesting, Organisation Against Tax Abuse, Undoing Tax Abuse, because they say, I listened to Wayne Duvenacher, and he said, people are talking about a tax strike. He said, look, at national level, you can't withhold taxes. They're going to come for you and they'll put you in jail. And they have every right to. No matter if people are stealing, you cannot withhold. But he said at rates level, you can fix the pothole yourself, keep the slips on what it cost you, and then keep that money back from the metro, from the city. So things like that could be a solution.
James, how are you?
Yes.
First of all, apologise for the incoming call. Angus, out of interest, I mean, you know, look, I'll be honest, I was out here when the explosion of violence happened in 21 July. I saw that, and you know, for me that was the death knell of what I saw as the future in South Africa. I spent 10 months travelling last year. I didn't go to the traditional places, go and look for better places. I ended up going to Georgia, which was absolutely fantastic until the proximity of Ukraine exploded. And I've looked at various other options, but to get back to South Africa, and what's been interesting is the countries that I've visited have given me an external perspective against which I can compare South Africa coming back. And my first conclusion is every South African politician, bar none, is missing the point of what's pissing the South African people off at grassroots level. And I'm talking about the black majority abstention vote. No one gets it. And my feeling is that the reason they're not getting it is there's a deep-seated, pissed-off anger. I mean literally, a bellicose, deep-shouted scream of anger. And no one's tapped into that. Like, no one has gone along to people and said, that is, I understand your pain. And this is the solution on offer. The DA, you know, sorry, just my own observation, I'll let you respond. But every single opposition party goes, big bad ANC, look at us, we do better where we rule. That's it, end of story. But they don't offer any meaningful solution and say to the people after or at the rally, A, B, C, D. This is immediately how you start and how you can change it. And if they get that right, you bring the abstention vote into the opposition party and don't base it on race. I've also got another solution on that. But I'd love to know what your observation is on that.
I mean, okay, first thing I would say is I'm loath to criticize the DA for not being more powerful or being better. I really think it's a tough old job. There's no question that Helen Zille tried to steal money or John Steenhuisen has been corrupt or that they haven't worked incredibly hard, incredibly non-racially and inclusively. There's no question they've never said anything racist. If they did, it would have been all over the place. They've gone out into touch. I mean, these people work incredibly hard, are incredibly dedicated. If they're not perfect, it's a bit harsh for us to judge them as such. I think the DA is doing a tolerably decent job in very difficult circumstances. I'm a member of the DA, I'm a member of AfriForum, you know. Being in politics is really, really hard. You know, it's not John Steenhuisen's fault that he's white. It's not Henderson's fault that she's white. You know, people are going to say, well, I can't vote. I sometimes ask black people, I say, you vote for I say, no, I'm voting Diaz. I say, well, Diaz led by John Stewart is white. I say, I don't care. I'm going to vote for him. Okay, good, thank you. Unfortunately, that's not everyone. A lot of people say, you know, I just can't bring myself to do that. People vote by group, not conviction. I think here's the punchline, I would say. Lawrence Schlemmer, which he was lost to South Africa, he was one of our most important sociologists. He did the hard yards of actually asking people why they, you know, made certain decisions. He passed on a few years ago. He was interviewed in a film that Rian Milan made with someone called Lloyd Ross, and it was about, I put it on Facebook by the way, you can go check it out, that film, from about 2007, but he asked, Lawrence Schlemmer asked people, he goes out into the market, so why are you voting? And he said that people actually say, they come with very good answers, they said, you know what, we know the ANC steals, we know they're going to break their promises, we know they're not going to deliver. But he said, would you still vote for them? We vote for them because they love us. And they're able to communicate that.
Yeah.
Now, you can say what you like about Julius Malema. I obviously don't. He's my class Marxian enemy. You know? Julius Malema has a real feel for his people. There's no doubt about it. You watch him, he really does love his people, and you feel that from him. He can speak the language as it needs to be spoken. He can get down with crowds. He really does care at that level, on some visceral level. There really is a passion. And quite a lot of black people respond to him. You know, I've had conversations, you know, reasonable people, and they just get it. That's politics. Why would a working class red state American vote for Trump? I mean, the Republican Party, people have said this, Turkey's voting for Christmas. Republican Party's not pro-workers and all that. So Trump has a feel for these people. He gets up on stage, he says what they want to hear. He doesn't say, listen, you're lazy and you're overweight, don't work, this country's got the most opportunity in the world, and stop blaming China and blaming foreign offshoring factories and Muslims. Go and flipping work, this is America. He doesn't say that to poor white Americans. Yeah.
So, to bring it back to a South African perspective, I mean, I've got, you know, it's so easy and no one recommends it. And look, I do, maybe as a direct DA member you can correct me if I'm wrong, but nowhere do I see in the manifesto, and it's so easy. What is our number one problem? Lack of education. We all know. Cadre deployment into the educational setup has absolutely wrecked it. But immediately, you can download an app free of charge. I think they have the educational syllabus on Vodacom free of charge. But I mean, you look at the Khan Academy and Khan Kids. Literally, what that academy is, it's Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded. Literally, it has the nursery school, the entire nursery school syllabus, and it self-checks and self-regulates. You can't get to the next level until you've actually cleared it via testing. They've got the entire American junior and senior school syllabus right the way through to postgraduate, whatever you want. And all you need is internet access. Now it's happening and it's going to come double quick time. We're not dependent on cell phone networks. Starlink is basically going to have universal coverage of the entire world within the next year. So that means you have an ability to downlink anywhere to a centralized node. You network that, and you can put the most remote place with a smartphone into access and education.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly respond to that. All these technocratic ideas, great opportunities we've never had before, wonderful, no one's arguing against that. There's something missing, though, from the way we discuss these things, and it's basically to do with the modern aversion to tragedy. Okay, up to around the 1600s, tragedy was a part of life. It was celebrated in arts, for example, Shakespeare or Goethe, etc. We had a real sensibility that tragedy is part of life. Okay, and we became, in the modern era, we've got to fix everything, and usually it's going to be fixed with technology, or the future's going to fix it. We've got to get rid of poverty, no more poverty, no more AIDS, or whatever the problem, throw any problem. Well, life has a tragic element to it. We all do die at the end, I think. Our friends die, we get sick. And that's something that in a way stops us, I think, from appreciating the reality better. I think there's something wrong, particularly in the Western mind. Okay, I'm saying this because it's in the book, you can read about it, and come across thinkers like Ian McGilchrist, I mentioned Jonathan Haidt. A preponderance on the value of autonomy and freedom over the values of interdependence and sanctity and honor and respect. So we've got stuck on a kind of liberal, self-perpetuating cycle. When we've got a problem, no matter that freedom caused the problem, what do we need? We need more freedom, and then we'll solve that problem. If people are unhappy, we just need more freedom. Child's unhappy, well, that's because they're not free. They're stuck in their gender or whatever it is. We need to give them more freedom. At no point do we stop and say, well, hang on a second, pull back a bit. We need the other conservative values as well. Anyway, that's in the book, so you can read that.
And Angus, where can we get the book?
So, it's on Amazon. I've been trying, I was desperately trying to get copies for today. I couldn't. I only got one. But you can download the Kindle edition on the Amazon or order it off Amazon. I am working on getting it on Takealot and into bookstores. It is published in America, that was the complication, not in South Africa. It's published in Texas by Defiance Press and Publishing, but you can get it on Amazon and hopefully soon on Takealot.
Or maybe we can auction this.
Is it signed?
1,000 rand a day.
Signed?
Any last question, Johan?
Look forward to reading your book. Parallel to Cape Secession, there's strong voices for KZN secession. Yesterday was news piece, IP apparently growing by leaps and bounds. Are we seeing the re-emergence of Zulu nationalism? Or is there something sinister? Are Zuma trying to create his own little kingdom to pick up where he left off 10 years back? If that happens, does that legitimize a Cape secession? And if that happens, are we back to the old placeline system of 50 years back, this time maybe by choice? I want to hear your thoughts on that.
You know, yeah, I just can't see KZN secession at all. I mean, they're not in a bad position in the sense that, Zulus are well represented at the top table of national government. If I'm a Zulu, I'm going, well, if you're white, you've got no representation. If you're coloured, you've got no representation. If you're Indian, you've got no representation at top table, at national government. If you're Zulu, you have. Not too bad. I think one of the most important political forces, if you want to talk about a sort of return to kind of ethnic politics, is AfriForum. And the reason I say that is because, they screwed up royally, the Afrikaners, by racializing this idea of Afrikanerness. I mean, that's a problem. When many Afrikaners are not white, they're coloured, and now you say, no, but you're not Afrikaans. A, and B, no, but we're going to... And then, the reason for your Afrikaner nationalism was because of what the British did to you in concentration camps. Well, then why aren't you picking on English speakers in that case? It doesn't make sense. This is just outright racism. So, the fact that the Afrikaners have got over their terrible race obsession, which, as I say, was incredibly ruinous for the whole country, never mind for them, now form something like, which, and I, as a member of AfriForum, people of all races who are members of AfriForum, and they're obviously locking down on this thing called Afrikaner, which has a real indigenous roots in this country. We are South African, we belong here, we have a voice, we are going to, and we're constitutional, we're not here to oppose the Constitution, we're actually going to protect the Constitution. I think there's something, and they've got a lot of skills, for example. I think there's something very powerful in that, and it's important. And I support it, because I think anything that builds and creates order and is tolerably inclusive, which AfriForum is. AfriForum's not, any person can go be a member of AfriForum, all right, there's no limit. And advise people to build from the ground up. It says, listen, you've got a story, fine, do it, we'll give you a structure, start, fix the pothole, and then we'll talk. So, I think that is, I worry about the DA, because whatever the DA does, they call him racist. Got a white leader, you're racist. Well, no, we've just got a white leader because we had a system of voting whereby that guy ended up winning the votes. Now, Herman Mashaba is a conservative, he's an arch conservative, he's a businessman. This is no Marxist radical Africanist. He can't quite break bread with the DA. In fact, he was more comfortable with the EFF. There is just a cultural thing going on that's hard. I don't know what to do about it. It's just there. And so, anyway, we have to try and balance those if I'm making sense.
And so Malcolm had a question.
Yeah, it's the questions about South Africa's context in terms of international relations. We are a member of BRICS. Russia is a member of BRICS. Do we compromise ourselves in this current Ukrainian war situation with the West, one of our principal trading partners?
No, thanks, Malcolm. I think it's a great place to end as well, but thank you. I think it's a perfect question. I don't have conspiracy theories. I think one country violates a border that Putin himself had signed to in the 90s when he was a deputy to Yeltsin, sends tanks into the capital city. You've got to say, well, that's an outright invasion of borders. It goes against international rule of law, international order, and he must be stopped if we're going to have such a thing as an international order. South Africa gets things wrong not only on the domestic front, it gets things wrong morally, ethically on the international front. Okay, so not only do we have a degradation of civilization within the country with the collapse of things like ESCOM and the collapse of our institutions, we have a kind of degradation of the rules of world civilization by supporting Russia, and it's the same people supporting Russia. Okay, now there's complicated, there are many reasons why they support Russia. I won't go into that. Some of them are understandable, but still, it's the wrong move. The DA, for example, amongst other groups, says no. And I believe, here's the answer. This business of, sort of equivalence, the West does this and then Russia does that. No, I believe Western civilization and Western values are a thing. And I can't help supporting that. Okay, I come from that, obviously you can see, I come from that background, A. B, I just happen to think that this is the most universal. Anyone can go to Australia of any race from any country and they and join the professional managerial class and get well paid and well looked after and not discriminated against. Okay. Countries like South Korea, for example, and Japan can adopt these Western political value systems. They don't have to culturally become Christian or anything like that. They could stay Buddhist or whatever it is. They can adopt in a political sense these structures of institutions, and they work. Okay. And Japan, of course, is on the side in this story in South Korea, etc., on the side of the West. So this is a universalist story. It might have happened to have come from one place, and we can call it Western values, but very much these are universal now. And it's up to groups like the DA to say, well, guess what? In 1994, we had a constitution that very much follows this tradition. Okay, that's what we meant to be protecting now. You are violating that in the ANC. Okay, we are the inheritors of this, or at least our values are the inheritors. It's up to us to defend this. It's up to us to defend it here in South Africa, and it's up to us to defend it globally if we have to. Say whatever footsake to the Russian warship in the Cape Harbor.
Just in conclusion, a little bit of good news. Okay, so we are in the Marshalltown City Improvement District here, which is a success. If we didn't have that City Improvement District, we wouldn't be here today. What this means is we've got 24 security guards, we've got roving patrols, we've got the private sector are cleaning the streets of Marshalltown, thanks to the banks largely and benevolent landlords. So this is a success. The Braamfontein City Improvement District is a success. Then Umgeni District in the KZN Midlands is a success. So I do think somehow we become a little bit anti-fragile, those of us that still move in the space, and there are a few successes, but tremendous enlightenment from you. Thank you very much, Angus, and please support Angus by buying his book on Amazon. Thank you.
Thanks.